Okay, they're coming in.
Okay, so should I just keep going? Hi, my name's Dave Long, and we're talking about peas and beans. I've been a master gardener for a number of years, gardener here in Tahoe for a little over 20 years, and hoping to get some input from you, our participants, about how these types of beans and peas grow. So let me just get into it and see what we have. Here we go. Okay. Title of this is AAS winner is peas and beans. I'm going to have trouble all night with that. Our group that has been working on this includes the Master Gardeners of Lake Tahoe, Slow Foods Lake Tahoe, UC Davis Tahoe Environmental Research Center, Turk. Between us, we either manage or help manage a number of demonstration gardens around the lake. The Tahoe, the Truckee Demonstration Garden at the Regional Park, the North Lake Tahoe Demonstration Garden at the Sierra Nevada College, and the demonstration garden in Tahoe City at the Turk Field Station, the old fish hatchery in Tahoe City, and then the Tlac Estates, the vegetable garden there. Our group manages or helps manage those. So this is on beans and peas, and we're providing the workshop. You can participate. You will receive support on how to manage or grow or maintain your peas and beans. And all you have to do to participate is to give us your contact information. And if you want the seeds, then you pay your $15 and you get the seeds. We may send out notes and tips periodically during the growing season. And if you have any questions, you can contact me directly and I will respond. We're asking you at the end of the growing season, we will be asking you at the end of the growing season how these seeds performed. The whole idea here on the grow your own in Lake Tahoe has to do with having the ability to grow foods, certain types of food, certain quantities of food in an environmentally friendly, safe manner. And that involves making sure that your garden is not close to a watershed, water stream, lake, or percolation basin where your materials might get washed into the stream or off your property. Gardens should not be established on steep slopes where you cannot control runoff. And when you do water, you should water wisely so that you do not push nutrients below the root zone where it can impact your water resources. You should be conscious of your actions that affect the watershed as a gardener. You remember that fertilizers that help your plants grow will also help algae and invasive aquatic species grow as well. So you want to use as little fertilizer as you can in an appropriate manner so that the lake and streams are protected. When you do use fertilizers and amendments, as Heather probably mentioned last week on her talk on Gardening 101, you should be mindful of the concentration and the amounts of fertilizer. Using a low ratio fertilizer but at high application rates is the same thing as using a high percentage fertilizer at lower rates. So be aware of the type of fertilizer or nutrient that you're adding. If there's rain forecast or snow, it's better to hold off applying your fertilizer or nutrients because it's more likely to have a runoff potential during rain or snow. And then having moist soils when you apply your fertilizer helps dissolve the fertilizer. If it's a salt in its solid state, be more soluble, get into the root zone quicker. So make sure you don't apply your fertilizers on real extremely dry soils. I think okay. So let's talk about what we're doing today. We're talking about peas and beans, or beans and peas, and part of this talk, I have to give credit to a good friend of mine, Katie Merino Townsend, who started the beans and peas workshops last year. And so here we are a year later doing more. What we learned last year when we handed out seedlings was that we damaged a lot of them because of the growth habit of peas and beans. And so this year, we're able to offer seeds. So instead of getting 2 or 3 seedlings of each 4 or 5 varieties, this year you'll get 10, 15, 20 seeds of each of these varieties. So you're getting more growing potential and more varieties for the cost of a few seedlings that did not perform very well. Just because of the growth habit of this group of plants. So let's talk about the AAS. That's the All-American Selection. It's a nonprofit organization that was started in 1932 to provide new varieties of plants, including vegetables and fruits, to home gardeners. The idea was that plants that had potential that were proposed by seed companies or universities would be trialed throughout North America, and the best of those trials would be evaluated and then given a selection. And that's all it is. It's an AAS stamp of approval saying that in a wide variety of environments, this new type of seed performed very well. And of the, for example, they get close to 500 applicants each year. It's winnowed down to a half a dozen that actually make the All-American Selection. And each year it includes at least 1 edible plant, typically 1 perennial plant, and 1 flowering plant for your garden. The idea was proposed by Ray Hastings, who was president of the South Seedmen's Association in 1932. Their motto is tested nationally and proven locally. They have about 80 test gardens throughout the United States and Canada, and only professional horticulturalists can be judges. And these can be professors at university or members of the seed profession, horticultural profession. So that's why we selected them. So next slide, let's see what we have. When we're talking about peas and beans, one of the things that Katie Merino was adamant about was talking about the nutritional value of the foods we grow. Unfortunately for my presentation, I had difficulty in finding a side-by-side comparison for beans and peas. So the best I could come up was with this nutrition facts for beans that was based on string beans, canned string beans. And it's based on 1 cup. Whereas with the peas, we're talking about fresh garden peas, but we're only talking about a half a cup. So you can't compare apples to apples here. You get, you know, it's not the same values. But as you can see right off the bat, a half a cup of peas, 62 calories, where a whole cup of canned string beans are only 28 calories. And when you're looking at things like carbohydrates, a whole cup of canned string beans are 5.6 grams of carbohydrates, whereas a half a cup of peas has 11 grams. So the fiber, everything is slightly different, but bottom line is they're both nutritious, have very good nutrition profiles, and should be incorporated into your diets unless you have some specific dietary issue. Nitrogen fixation in peas and beans. In preparing this presentation, I had a bit of trouble in the organization of some of these topics. The reason is that peas and beans are very similar. They're both, in this case, legumes. They both have the ability to fix atmospheric nitrogen, or the bacteria do, and it's done in a similar manner. So I can talk about these two items together. As we get further out, we have to talk about them individually. So it may be confusing, but hang in there with me. So fixation of nitrogen by peas and beans. Atmospheric nitrogen into represents 70-some% of our atmosphere, but it's not available for plants. They cannot use atmospheric nitrogen. So a number of plants in the legume family have the ability, through a symbiotic arrangement with bacteria, to fix atmospheric nitrogen. And the bacteria infects, that's a poor term, but infects the roots of the plant. The plant's response is to form a nodule around the bacteria colony. The nodule actually provides nutrients to the bacteria, while the bacteria are happy converting atmospheric nitrogen into a nitrate that the plant can use. This infection, or this nodule formation, is very important for a number of plants, the legumes, that are known to grow in notoriously poor soils, not well loamed soils. So it's a good symbiotic relationship, but it is rather complex, because as the plant grows and matures and starts setting seeds, the nutrients that the plant has from photosynthesis moves more and more to the production of seeds and seed pods, and less to root development and nutrients to the nodules. So as the plant matures, it actually cuts off the nutrients to these nodules, which causes the bacteria to start shutting down, and it does not fix as much atmospheric nitrogen as when the plant is in a young growth stage. So there is a cycle to the arrangements between the bacteria and the plants. I'll talk a little more when we get down the road, I guess. Okay, trellising. Again, common to both beans and peas, trellising provides support for the vines as they grow up. There's a number of trellising techniques that you can use depending on how you're growing your peas and beans. This first one over here, this one over here, is an A-frame, where it's just wooden A-frame with chicken wire, allows the plants to grow up either side. And if you're using drip irrigation, the drip irrigation is in that A-frame at the base, where it doesn't, it can serve both sides of the A-frame. If you're growing in a hill or a mound situation, where you're using a cage like a tomato cage, or in this case here, a wire cage, then you can use that, and you plant around the cage, and the seedlings take off and grow up the cage. And this one to the very far right is just a homemade, a couple pieces of bamboo with some twine wrapped around it, and that's sufficient to provide support for the plants. Yeah. So when we're talking about peas now, originally we were talking about them together. Now we're talking about peas, then we'll talk about beans. I hope that's not too confusing. Peas are thought to be native to the Mediterranean area. It's a legume in the Piscium family, or Piscium genus. It's been a staple food for thousands, tens of thousands of years. One study that was, I love these studies. It was the study of the tartar buildup on Neanderthal teeth, and the analysis of that indicated that a high percentage of the fibrous diet in the Neanderthals' diet were from peas and similar types of materials. The garden pea is fully domesticated. And what that means is there is no known wild populations of the wild pea. There are similar species, but the actual sativum is only in a domesticated form. There is no wild form of this. It's been domesticated for so long, it's genetically different from wild peas enough for it is its own species. There are 3 subspecies. Each subspecies represent a different type of domestication. Botanically, peas are a fruit. The plant itself is an annual plant. The flowers are perfect flowers, which means they have all the parts. They are self-fertile. The stems of the pea plant are hollow, and at the leaf axials, there will be tendrils that help support the plant. And if you look at the picture here, you can see the tendrils that come off of the leaf axials to help hold it up. Peas are considered a cool weather plant. They can tolerate a bit of frost, and you can start planting them 2 to 3 weeks before the last hard frost, which in Tahoe we typically think of as 28 degrees. So it is a cool weather plant. It is a great plant to start your season with. It grows rather rapidly, so it's one of the first things that you can start harvesting. We talked about the types of peas. More specifically, we have 3 types of peas that we're talking about tonight. One is a garden pea, or an English pea, and that's a pea that is eaten just the pea itself, not the pod. A field pea in this hierarchy is a same thing, but it is collected and dried and shelled. So if you're eating peas and you're shelling them and drying them, it's a field pea. If you're eating them raw, it's a English pea or a garden pea. If you're eating the pea and the pod, then it's a snow pea or a sugar snap pea. A snow pea or a Chinese seed pod, you eat the pod and the seeds before the seeds are mature. And then a sugar snap pea is a cross between the garden pea and the snow pea, and you usually eat the pea before it's mature and the pod together. You don't have to. You can shell them, and that's fine. Just as an aside, in England, National Pea Week is the 7 days beginning on the first Monday of July. The first television commercial in Great Britain was for Bird's Eye frozen peas in 1969. Before that, there was no commercial TV. It was a state monopoly. But the first commercial was about peas. International Mushy Pea Day is November 8th. And really the second week in November is National Split Pea Week, which is always fun, I guess. Okay, I wanted everyone to know that you can eat the leaves and the tendrils, the tender leaves, the upper leaves of the pea plant. You can saute them. It's popular in Asian cuisines, and the modern American nouveau cuisine seems to love raw pea leaves and tendrils as part of salads and as on top of certain entrees, they put the leaves. So you can eat the leaves raw. You can eat the peas raw. You can eat the peas and leaves cooked as well. One of the interesting things, though, is the common sweet pea. Same family, different genus, the sweet pea is rather poisonous. So a lot of people grow sweet peas, and in parts of the United States, The garden pea or the English pea is sometimes called the sweet pea, but the sweet pea that most people know as the flower is actually rather poisonous, causing paralysis, difficulty breathing, and convulsions. So if you have kids, especially if kids into gardening and they see a garden pea and you happen to be growing sweet peas, make sure they understand that one is edible raw, one will make you very sick raw or cooked or however. Okay. Gosh, this is fun. Okay, last funny thing, the peas porridge. The nursery rhyme was first found in print in about 1760. It's been around since medieval times, and it referred to the use of a split pea type of pot soup, almost like a, well, porridge, that was the base for several types of meals that could be eaten hot or cold, and they would just keep adding to the pot for a week at a time, 7 days. And so, yeah, some like it hot, some like it cold, some like it in the pot. Well, you know that one. Okay, let's get into the planting guidelines. If you're going to be planting peas, again, you can plant them 2 to 3 weeks before the last frost. We're in Tahoe and Truckee, who knows when that's going to be. But 2 to 3 weeks before the last frost, you want to plant them on well-drained soils. If you have poor drainage, one of the things you can do is called mounding, either a mounded row or a mounded hill. And then that gives you enough elevation so water will percolate below the majority of the roots. And then you can plant in that situation, or you can amend your poor drained soil with sand and gravel, and that will increase the percolation rates, the permeability of your soils. Amending the soils with organic matter or manures or compost actually will make it even less able to drain. So you want sand or gravel to help with percolation rates. Soil pH is optimum in the range of 5.5 to 7, which in the Tahoe Truckee area is 90% of our soils. Alpine County is the same way. When you start getting into Douglas County down off the hill, you sometimes can have a pH above 7, especially in the alluvial soils, but that's unusual. And like I said, 2 to 3 weeks. Most of the varieties that we're talking about will benefit from support or trellising. Even the ones that only grow a couple feet tall, you can manage the plants and harvest the pea pods much easier when they're staked and you have trellising. Seeds are planted 1 inch deep. It doesn't matter the orientation of the seed for peas or beans. For peas, you could consider soaking the peas overnight in water prior to planting. That will speed the germination, and it seems to help, especially if you have dry soil conditions. You want to plant the seeds about 4 inches apart, and water in if the soil is excessively dry. When you have trellising, you want to top off the plants when they reach the top of the trellis or slightly above the trellis. What that will do is cause the plant to form secondary branches at the leaf axials, 2 or 3 leaves down, and that will increase the foliage, increase the surface area, increase the number of flowers, and increase your pea pods. So that helps. The other thing that helps with production is to harvest every 2 or 3 days. Once you remove the pea pod from the plant, that triggers the plant to start forming another flower, another pea pod on another part of the plant. So frequent harvesting will increase the overall production. And then if you replant every 2 to 3 weeks, reseed it every 2 or 3 weeks, that will extend your season. and extend the amount of peas that you'll get. And then once the plant is done, and typically you'll know it's done because the lower leaves will be wilty and turn yellow as the plant draws the nutrients out of the older leaves, moves it to new growth, flowers, and pea pods. So once production starts tapering off, you can cut off the plant top and put it in compost or your recycle bin, or however you dispose of your green plant materials. By leaving the roots in the soil, though, what happens is those nodules that contain all these nitrogen-fixing bacteria will be available for the next generation of plants that are planted there. And so you have somewhat better quality soil, especially if you're going to be planting another legume there, because then that will cause even more formations of more nodules on the second or third generation legume that you plant. And then from season to season, we recommend that you rotate to a different planting location. What that does is help build the soil throughout your garden, as the benefits of the nitrogen-fixing bacteria are in one area, and then you move that to another. So it improves the quality of the soil. Leaving the roots in the soil also helps with erosion control and water percolation as well. So pretty straightforward. So let's talk about the peas that we have as an offering today, this week. So Saturday, when you pick up the peas, what you're going to get is a bag. Inside the bag will be envelopes full of different varieties of peas that will be labeled, or at least we labeled them when we put them in the bag originally. So the first one we're talking about is Mr. Big Pea from the year 2000. This was developed by Semenus Vegetable Seeds. It's an English garden pea. It's very large. It's easily shelled. It germinates rather quickly, and within 60 days, you should have production. The plants are only 3 or 4 foot tall, so it doesn't require a large, tall trellis. Cages, tomato cages, or homemade trellises work very well for this. It's a very flavorful pea, easily shelled, and should be fun to have. In fact, in the Sacramento Bee today, Wednesday, they had a recipe for English garden peas and spaghetti. Looked pretty promising to me, so I may try that. Sacramento Bee on this today. The second one we have is one that you might see in the stores, in seed packets all over the place. And this is our sugar and snap pea. This was awarded the AAS note in 1984. It was developed by the Gallatin seed company out of Montana. It's a bush type of pea, and it's a sugar snap pea. So you eat the pea and the pod. Usually you can let the pods develop further and then shell the pods and just eat the peas if you want. But the plant is designed to be eaten peas and pods. It's a very quick germinating and growing plant, 55 days, and you should be having a harvest. It's a stringless variety. Stringless string. Okay, so what's the deal with stringless string? Okay, there's a fibrous stem-like part that splits open the pod, and stringless varieties are more edible, more digestible. The string actually is very fibrous, but the older style peas that were not stringless, what would happen is if you let the pea pod ripen fully and dry just before it was fully ripened and mature and dry, that string would pop, open up the pod, and throw out the seeds. The stringless varieties don't have that, making it better to eat, but for distribution in the wild or in your garden, it's a less effective measure. But hey, it's domesticated anyway. You don't want it flying all over your garden, so stringless is the way to go. Snack Hero. This is a relatively recent one, just a couple years ago. It's an interesting one in that it is a sugar snap pea. It is longer, looks almost like a bean plant pod. It's very sweet. It's a semi-bush, so supporting it will help a lot, and it grows rather quickly. The pods are 3 to 4 inches. It's also a stringless variety. It was developed by a company called Syngenta, which was a spinoff of AstraZeneca and Novartis, the pharmaceutical company, when they were still in the horticultural business. Just a couple of years ago, they split that out as a separate one, and now AstraZeneca strictly in the pharmaceutical market. So kind of an interesting history. A number of these seed and developers have some kind of pharmaceutical bend to the company at one point in the corporate world's life. AstraZeneca is one of those that was very big in horticulture and plant genetics for a number of years. Okay, so wrapping up our pea part, when you're talking about fresh peas for sale or processing, Minnesota, Washington, Wisconsin are the big three for growing fresh peas for sale. California is way down the list, in part because we have more valuable crops, tree crops and stuff, that tomatoes and that the state focuses on. When you're talking about dry pea production, North Dakota, hands down #1, having almost 50%, 47%, followed by Washington, Montana, and Oregon. This area of the country for Washington, Idaho, Montana, Oregon, the Palouse area, was long noted as being a key pea growing area, and they developed a number of extremely good growing, good tasting peas. And only about 20 years ago did North Dakota start getting into pea production. For all this said, the United States only accounts for about 4% of the world's production of dry peas. India, China, Pakistan, China far outgrow us for dry pea production. Okay. Now then, this is one of those things that just because I'm doing the presentation, I get to talk about, and that's split pea. What the heck is a split pea, and how do you split a pea? There's actually a couple methods for doing this commercially. The commercial one is they have rollers that are set a certain distance apart, and they just put in dry peas and they roll the dry peas through. It cracks the shell of the pea, the outer skin that's dry, and then using an air classifier or a winnowing screen, they blow air to separate the split pea from the shell, remaining shell parts, the shaft. Anyway, so at home you can do this with dry peas by just putting a cloth over the top of them, using a rolling pin and lightly cracking the peas open. The peas will split naturally along a seam, a fissure between the two cotyledon pre-leaves of the pea plant, and it will split naturally. And then you need to use a winnowing basket or a sifter of some kind to get rid of the remains of the pea skin. one of the more interesting techniques, if you have fresh peas, is how do you skin a fresh pea to get fresh split peas? And the way to do that is boiling water with baking soda, sodium carbonate, and you boil until the skin splits, and then you use your hands to squeeze out the peas, and then you can rinse and use them, or rinse and dry them, split peas. And the only reason I have this in there is because I'm doing the presentation. Thank you. Let's talk about beans now. Beans, the common bean, cultivated in both Central and South America over 6,000 years ago. The indigenous inhabitants saw its value. They domesticated a number of varieties. They hybridized, they exchanged through trade, and really within 1,000 years of its first domestication, we saw beans being found in various locations as far north as Canada and as far south as Tierra del Fuego. So it was, along with corn and squash, it was one of those commodities that was traded heavily among the indigenous people of the New World. It was taken to Europe by Columbus, who found varieties of beans in Hispaniola on his first voyage, and then he brought other varieties back on his subsequent voyages. As with the pea, the bean is considered botanically a fruit. It does also have perfect flowers. It's self-fertile. The stems are solid compared to the hollow stems of a pea, and the beans do not have tendrils. Rather, the stalk of the bean is self-supporting. It will start curling up. So you have a bean sprout and you put something against it, it will automatically, not automatically, it will slowly rotate around to entwine itself around it, to use that as a support. Beans are a much warmer weather plant as compared to peas. So you want to start planting this after the last frost of the year. And again, in Tahoe, that's a hit and miss guessing game, especially this year, it seems. Okay, there's a lot of types of beans. You have snap beans. That would be like your typical string bean, where you eat the bean and pod. The bean is not mature, the pod is tender, you eat them both. So a string bean. If the string bean happens to be real skinny, then that's called a French green bean or a filet bean. If you shell the bean and only eat the fresh bean and not the pod, then that's called a shelled bean, and that would be like a lima bean that you would have. And then dry beans would be dried prior to rehydrating and eating. Pinto beans, black beans, kidney beans are all considered dry beans, even though you can buy cans of pinto beans and black beans. So that's it. As far as the plant classification, very similar to peas. Pole bean is considered one that requires support. The advantage is you have a longer period of harvesting the beans. The downside is you need to have the support to get maximum production. The bush bean is one that needs little or no support. The beans all ripen very quickly, about the same time. So the bush bean is very accommodating to commercial industrial harvesting, where they can set the beans, they don't need trellising, and then when the beans are ready to be harvested, all the beans are ready to be harvested, and they can come in with their mechanized harvesting equipment and harvest all the beans at one time. And then of course we always have the intermediate one, the semi-bush bean, which has a little bit of both. It is shorter than a pole bean, so it does not need as much support. Its production period is slightly longer than a bush bean, slightly shorter than a pole bean. And for those of you who are really into it, last year was the year of the bean, according to the National Garden Group. National Bean Day is January 6th. And that was selected because that's the day that date that Gregor Mendel died. He's of course noted for genetics work on peas, but he actually started his genetics work on beans before he switched to peas. National Eat Your Bean Day is July 3rd. National Baked Bean Day is July 4th. And why in the heck they would ever have a National Green Bean Casserole Day, I don't know, but it is in December. So the Green Bean Casserole Day was a one-person crusade. J.C. Shoemaker Galloway had this thing that she wanted it. So it's a one woman crusade to get it done, and she got it done. So National Green Bean Casserole Day. Whew. Planting beans, somewhat similar to peas. Select your planting location, well-drained soils. If poorly drained, you can use elevated rows or elevated mounds so that you have well-drained soils up above your poor drained area, or you can amend the soils, as I said, sand or gravel. pH is optimum, exactly what we have in Tahoe, 5.5 to 7. You want to plant it after the last estimated frost date, especially the young bean plants are very sensitive to freezing temperatures for more than a couple hours. If the variety we're talking about requires or will be helped by a trellis, or you want to put a trellis in, put it in before you plant your beans. It's much easier to have your trellis and plant around your trellis and plant your beans and then try to work your trellising once the beans start sprouting. 4 inches apart, again, just like peas, water in if the soil is dry. Top off the plant when it reaches the top of your trellis. This again will cause the plant to have secondary stems, branches that will have more surface area, more leaves, more opportunity for flowers and fruit or bean sprouts. Harvesting is the same, 2 to 3 days. Extending the season by replanting every 2 or 3 weeks, and treating the plant as you would the pea plant, leaving the roots in place for the benefit of erosion control, plus increasing the amount of nitrogen fixing bacteria in that soil location, and then rotate. The beans that we have selected are the Kentucky pole bean. This was from 1991. It's an Idaho company, Rogers Brothers. It combines. It's a hybrid between the Blue Lake and the Kentucky Wonder. 6 to 8 inch pods, straight. It's a stringless variety. You can eat this as either a string bean, or you can let the beans ripen further, and you can eat the beans separate as green bean salad, green bean whatever, green bean casserole, whatever you want. Okay, the Seychelles pole bean, this is from 2017. It was developed by the Baker brothers. The vines here are even taller, so that 6 to 8 foot vines. You don't have to have your trellising that high. You can have it at 4 or 5 foot, and then again top it off, and that will send up secondary shoots. Pods are slender, and this could be considered a French bean or a filleted bean. 5 to 6 inches length, 55 days germination, and this would be best eaten as a string bean or a French bean. Immature seeds and the pods together. The Bush Derby bean are from 1990. I've grown this for a number of years. This is out of a seed firm, Ferry Morris, an American firm, been around forever. In the 1940s and 50s, Ferry Morris was the largest seed producer in the world. It's changed hands and a lot of things have happened, but it's still around. The Derby Bush bean is a quality plant. heavy producer. It does not need trellising, but to manage the plant and to harvest the beans easier, having a short trellis helps. And it's only 24 inches high. Again, so not absolutely necessary, but managing your plants will be, and harvesting will be a little bit better with trellising. Since it's a bush bean, most of the beans will mature at the same time. So one harvest and get rid of the beans and replant for the next time, if you want to do that. The Cherokee wax yellow bean, 1948. This is one of the older ones that we have, developed by Clemson University during World War II. I should say during World War II, the AAS really looked and promoted beans and peas and legumes that the home gardener could grow that needed no or little fertilizer, because the ammonia, nitrates, and stuff like that that were fertilizer based were being used in the war effort to make explosives. So during the war years, the AAS really had a number of beans and peas and other legumes, peanuts, that they gave the awards to. The term wax bean or wax bean means it's yellow. So really this is a Cherokee yellow bean. The beans itself, the mature beans are actually blue-black, but the pod is yellow. It's a bush bean. Also, it's another one that's in the 20 to 24 inch tall range. It's a stringless variety, and it's best eaten pods and all. So there you go. So those are the plants that we have. Those are the seeds that you'll be getting. You'll be getting a little packet of each one, enough for just about any size garden. So feel free when you get them to share them with your neighbors. So one of the things that I found out that I had not heard about, and it took me a long time to really put my head around this, that eating raw or undercooked beans does cause severe gastroenteritis, digestion problems, a lot of digestion problems, especially with kidney beans, red kidney beans. In fact, this one citation I have, this Wild Oats blog, Undercooked Beans Dangerous, claimed that up to 20% of reported food poisoning cases came from raw or undercooked beans. And the CDC actually has a notice out about using slow cookers on low temperature to cook kidney beans, because those lectins, which cause the gastroenteritis, do not break down at low temperatures, even though the beans are cooking. So cooking beans in a slow cooker under low for long periods of times is not recommended, because of the severity of the stomach problems that you'll have. And then I do love this kind of elementary school stuff. So beans is musical fruit. There is some reason for that, and that's because beans contain a significant amount of a high molecular sugar that only partially digests in the large intestine, with the byproducts of that digestion being CO2, methane, and hydrogen, which remain as well, so anyway, have beans with every meal. So I'm doing the presentation, so I get to do it. In bean production, here we go. Dry beans, North Dakota, again, very high, a third of the nation's production, and is in North Dakota. California comes in number 7. The most popular beans that are dry beans, according to the Dry Bean Association, is pinto beans. Black beans are number 5. But when you're talking about fresh snap beans, that should be California is number 1 in fresh snap bean production. Delaware, number 2, surprisingly to me anyway. And you see the other 5 there. So when we're talking about dry beans, if you remember, we said United States was 4% of the world in peas. We're actually at 2% of world production when it comes to dry bean production. It's much more important food type for many of the other parts of the world. So real quick, Jack and the Beanstalk story, first published as Jack and the Beanstalk, or it was Jack Spriggins and the Enchanted Bean in 1734. A version of this morality story goes back thousands and thousands of years, but the version that included the magic beanstalk only started appearing in storytelling in the 1500s, in part because the beans were New World plants. So there you go. Everybody wants to know about peas and bean festivals. The Purple Hull Pea Festival in Emerson, Arkansas is this year in June, if you want to go out there. If you have a rototiller, they also have the international rototiller races that go along with this, as well as a Purple Hull Pea Shelling Championship. And you can also sign up to be Miss Purple Hull Pea, along with a quart. Very, very festive. And then the Dry Bean Festival here in Tracy, California is August 27th, 28th. And the Michigan Bean Festival in Fairgrove, Michigan, we're not sure about that. COVID really put the hit on a number of these vegetable festivals, these small time festivals. I'm not sure if Michigan is going to bounce back or not. I have not heard from them, although I have gotten communication from the Purple Hull Pea and the Tracy Dry Bean Festival. Okay, last thing that I think the last thing I want to talk about is seed saving. Beans and peas are perfect for seed saving. I mean, you're getting dried seeds, you're going to be planting them. It's great. So to save the seeds, leave the pod on the vine until it turns brown. Once the pod is brown and hard, just pull it off the vine. You should hear, when you shake it, you should hear the seeds rattle around in there. So just break open the pod, remove the seeds, put them in a paper bag, label it, and you can store it up to 2 years and they'll still be viable. So why a paper bag and not plastic? Well, even though that you can hear them rattle, they're still not completely dehydrated. So if you put them in plastic, there's a chance that they will go bad or they will soften or rot. But if you put them in something with some air circulation, like a paper bag, you'll be good to go. And then for picking up your seeds, same as always, it's going to be this Saturday. South in Truckee, it's at the community garden at the regional park. And in Tahoe City, it's at the Turk Fuel Station, the old fish hatchery on Lake Forest Road. And so that's where you're going to be picking them up. And again, you'll be receiving seeds. They'll already be labeled. They'll be individually packaged, and you'll be given a brown bag with all the seeds in there. And last couple notes here. We're already May 11th, and we're talking about peas and beans. Next week, we have Allison Toy with spicy salads, followed by potatoes and sunchokes. Our tater lady, Melissa, is scheduled to do that right now. Then squash, tomatoes, and herbs. And if you like this or any of the other upcoming talks and you want to hear them in person, where we actually do pantomime and all that kind of stuff with our talks, you can go to the Truckee Community Garden on the Saturday following our presentations, and we do a repeat performance, but it's more like theater in the round, where you sit around and we walk around and talk to you individually about your questions and growing tips and stuff like that. So with that, I'll take any questions and comments. The picture is me in Vienna a week ago. beautiful country. Got to go back. So thanks a lot, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Dave. That was a wonderful presentation. And we do have a few questions, and let me go over them. Let's see. The first question is, what happens if you accidentally leave a pea or bean on the vine? Will production stop?
No, but to maximize production, you want to remove them every couple days. You want to pick the ripe ones, the ones that you want. And you may want to have small ones that are very tender. You want to make larger peas or beans that are larger, more mature, more meaty type flavor or texture to them. But it won't cause the plant to stop completely, but you will see reduced production if you don't remove the early seed pods.
So if you harvest and then you want to collect the seeds, you can just let it go then after you
Yeah, if you want to collect the seeds, then just harvest the early ones, and as it's getting taller or more mature, then just let the latter ones go and let those mature and dry out, and then collect those later seeds for seed saving or for replanting later in the season or next year or 2 years from now.
Oh, okay. The next question is, was curious how long the seeds we will get are typically good for. I
2
think
years.
that means
2 years.
you can save them for 2 years before planting.
Yeah. At the first year, when you buy seeds in packets at the store, if you look on them, a quality seed packet will have the name of the seed, the planting instructions, and it'll have a date that the seed was designed to be planted on. And for seeds in peas and beans, you'll be buying them that were designed or packaged for planting this year, but the viability is for typically 2 years. And then after 2 years, the viability drops down significantly. So if you had 50 peas the third year, you may only have half of those sprout after the third season.
Okay. The next question, do you recommend fertilizing pea plants?
If you have a fairly good soil to begin with, there's no need to fertilize pea plants or bean plants. The exception would be is if your soil is nutrient deficient in phosphorus or potassium. Here in the Tahoe area, phosphorus can be a limiting factor in the growth of plants. But typically you don't need to fertilize them if you have decent soil to begin with. And if you're serious about gardening, it pays the $35 to send it to a lab to have a basic soils test done. And if you're interested in laboratories to do that, you can contact me, and there's a list of ones here in Nevada and California that we can, not that we would recommend them, but we've worked with them before.
A follow-up question on that was, I experienced mold on my pea plants last year. How do you deal with this? When you
I'm sorry. I should have mentioned pest and pest management. The most common problem with peas and beans is going to be powdery mildew, and that typically, and there's also a rust, a blackish rust that you can get on some of the leaves, and typically that is from watering the leaves. It's best not to put water onto the leaves themselves, so a drip irrigation or watering at the base of the plant is best. The other pests that you have for peas and beans are going to be your chipmunks and your squirrels, your rabbits, your deer, your bear, your neighbors, all wanting to take a taste. So, but the common one is powdery mildew, and it's primarily controlled with watering technique.
Okay, when you reseed your plants, should you use the same variety or mix it up?
No, use the same variety for that season. I mean, if you have the plants there, otherwise you'll be saying, well, is this one better eaten as a short one or a immature one, or should I let it mature? So no, just keep reseeding with the same seeds, same variety for that season at that location. If you want to do a different variety, pick a place next to the first variety and have that one going in there. But I would not recommend mixing and matching unless you have really tight space and you're trying to have peas and beans in a single pot or something like that.
Okay. What if you don't rotate your pea and bean crops year to year? Do you have problems in those subsequent years? Do diseases occur, or are you adding fertilizer? So that's why you
no. What happened? The advantage in rotating beans and peas is that you have the opportunity to have nitrogen fixing bacteria, nitrogen fixed materials in the soil, so that you do not have to use as much fertilizer for your squash or your corn or your strawberries or whatever you're going to grow in that spot the following year. But if you want to replant beans and peas in the same spot year after year, you can do that. Absolutely. Farmers do it. Pea and bean farmers do it year after year, no problem. But what you will be facing is that if you have some type of problem like powdery mildew, then you will have those spores build up in the soil and you'll have it happen more frequently. If you have a problem with aphids or thrips, you will see that if you plant the same plant over and over, you'll see those populations increase over time. But you can plant it 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and if you're manage your pest control, manage your watering, you'll be fine. No problem.
Okay, we have just a few more questions here. Has anyone grown cranberry bean, the Borlotti bean variety? This person bought some in North Carolina and fell in love with their flavor.
I'm not familiar with that variety, so I should point out that when we're talking about peas and beans, in our presentation, we're talking about an English style pea, but you do have other peas that are not true peas, like black-eyed peas, cow peas, and that kind of stuff. So I'm not sure which variety or what type of plant this person is referring to. So I apologize for that. Same thing though with beans. You have the beans we're talking about are New World beans, because you do have soybeans, you have fava beans, you have coffee beans that are still called beans, but are not the type that we're talking about. So I'm not familiar with that variety, cranberry bean.
Yeah, I've not heard of it.
If the person who asked that question could forward me some information, I'll be glad to look it up and see what I can dig up on it. That'd be fascinating to find out if we can grow cranberry beans here in Tahoe.
Yes. Let's see. Is cross-pollination a problem when you're seed saving? All these varieties.
Not well. It could be. You don't have to worry about like cross-pollination between beans and peas. It wouldn't work. But when you're talking about closely related, like different kinds of snap beans or snap peas rather, yeah, you could have some cross fertilization, but they're so close that I don't think if you save the beans for year after year, it would matter much, because after 3 or 4 years, you would have a Tahoe bean to begin with, because you'd probably pick the best of the best, and 3 or 4 generations, you would have a slightly different variety to begin with. So
I just had a request for your email.
here, let me back up.
that cranberry bean.
If I'm still sharing my screen, then there.
Okay, it's David M. Long at earthlink.net.
Earthlink.net.
Okay. Let's see. One person had a comment about the squirrels that they didn't get their any fruit because they're all eaten. Okay, another question, if you do get powdery mildew, should you just pull out the plant and start over?
No, no. If it's from watering techniques, please change your watering techniques. But typically what I've found is that even with types of drip irrigation, the bottom leaves of a pea plant, especially the pea plants, seem to get powdery mildew as the plant matures. But the matured part of the plant, the tender tendrils and the tender leaves still could be eaten, the pods will still grow. But once you start seeing the mildew moving up the plant and affecting the production, then you want to get rid of the plant. If you see powdery mildew actually affecting the pods themselves, then it's time to yank out the plant. And if that's starting to happen, then sit down with yourself and see how better you can water your plants.
The person here said that they were drip irrigating, so it shouldn't have been a real problem.
Well, it depends on the method of drip irrigation. Some of the drip irrigation, especially with the emitters, sometimes the emitters spray a little bit onto the leaves. The other thing is that we do have some condensation in the morning, and on bean plants that are supported, it has a tendency to affect the lower leaves and the lower portions of the plant rather than the top portions, higher portions of the plant. They get more air circulation just because of the higher elevation of that part of the plant. And
then the last question was, do peas and beans grow best in full sun or partial shade?
Good question. I don't actually know for sure because I've yet to find any place here in Tahoe that is always full sun. We seem to have enough trees all over, so it's always seemingly partial sun. But if it's full sun and you really have full sun, it can be hard for the plant to transpire during the heat of the day, and you may see some wilting during the heat of the day that should bounce back in the evening. It also, though, if you're in that situation, make sure that you do your harvesting early in the morning, not later in the day. The pods and the beans and the peas will be slightly more tender if you harvest them when they're well moistened in the morning, not in the afternoon, if you really are in a full sun situation. If the plant, though, starts wilting and does not seem to come back after a day or so of full sun, then you may want to consider putting shade cover over it. But I've not experienced that here in Tahoe, although I know we have people down in Carson that are participating, and in other areas where full sun is an issue. Somewhat related to that is wind. If it's hot and windy, it will cause the plants also to droop. And in this case, a lot of times the upper portion of the plants are more affected than the portion down closer to the ground, only because of the elevation of the plant and and the wind being slightly higher up your trellis.
Well, that is all of the questions that we had today.
Great.
No more. Thank you again, Dave, for your wonderful presentation.
My pleasure. I hope everything's good. I'm going to stop sharing my screen if it's still being shared. Okay. And look forward to talking to everybody about their beans and peas